Here is how women fall in love. And here is how men fall in love.
What you are about to hear will probably contradict everything you think you know about love, because love is not just an emotion, nor simply a matter of romance, compatibility, or chance. According to affective neuroscience and evolutionary biology, love is also a biological mechanism, deeply rooted in our evolutionary history.
When we look closely at what hormones actually tell us, a truth that is still little known begins to emerge. According to research in the neurobiology of attachment, particularly the work of anthropologist Helen Fisher, women tend to develop a stronger romantic attachment during orgasm, whereas men are more likely to develop romantic feelings at the moment they anticipate a sexual relationship. This difference is neither moral nor cultural, and certainly not the result of chance. It corresponds to ancient biological mechanisms shaped by evolution.
According to the principles of natural selection described in evolutionary biology, this functioning serves a very specific purpose. It is an ancient mechanism designed to promote fidelity between both partners. But why would nature need to impose such mutual loyalty? According to researchers in anthropology and evolutionary psychology, the answer is simple. The human infant is one of the most vulnerable in the animal kingdom, and for a particularly long period of time. It gains a significant advantage from the simultaneous and prolonged presence of both parents. Ultimately, everything comes back to the same fundamental issues: reproduction, survival, and transmission. And this is precisely what the science of love seeks to shed light on.
According to research in neuroscience, anthropology, and attachment psychology, falling in love never happens all at once. Researchers, particularly Helen Fisher, describe this process as a sequence of 3 major biological and psychological stages. The first stage, the one that triggers everything else, is desire. And it is precisely at this level that biological differences between men and women explain why each develops desire in a different way.
From a physiological perspective, desire does not rely on the same mechanisms in men and women. According to research in endocrinology and sexual neuroscience, in men, desire is primarily linked to testosterone. In women, it is more closely associated with estrogen. However, as many researchers in neuroendocrinology point out, the essential difference does not lie solely in the hormone itself, but in the rhythm at which it acts on the body and the brain.
According to studies on male hormonal cycles, men follow a daily hormonal rhythm. Their testosterone levels rise during sleep and reach a peak upon waking. This phenomenon, well documented in human physiology, explains why male desire is often present on a regular basis, and particularly in the morning.
Women, on the other hand, follow a monthly hormonal cycle. According to research in female endocrinology, estrogen levels peak just before ovulation, at the precise moment when fertility is at its highest. During these few days, sexual desire is generally more intense. This does not mean that women feel no desire outside their fertile period, but as studies in biology and sexual psychology show, their drive tends to be less frequent than that of men, while being more contextual, more sensitive to emotional, relational, and affective factors.
According to a large-scale data analysis published by the dating platform OkCupid, based on millions of real profiles and actual evaluations, there is a striking difference in how men and women perceive attractiveness. Women tend to rate the majority of men as below average, while men tend to rate the majority of women as average. This asymmetry, documented in particular by Christian Rudder, former head of research at OkCupid, raises an essential question. Why do women appear more demanding in their criteria of desire?
The answer lies largely in evolution. According to a fundamental principle formulated in 1972 by the biologist Robert Trivers in his work on parental investment, the sex that invests more in reproduction naturally becomes more selective in choosing a partner. In humans, women have historically borne the highest biological and social costs: pregnancy, health risks, dependence on a partner, and the risk of abandonment. This evolutionary pressure has gradually shaped a higher level of selectivity. Female desire is therefore not based solely on immediate attraction, but also on an unconscious logic of security and selection, extensively described in evolutionary psychology by researchers such as David Buss. But how does desire actually emerge in women? According to research in affective neuroscience, particularly the work of psychologist Rachel Herz, it begins with a sense that is often underestimated: smell. Unlike sight or hearing, which pass through the thalamus before being processed by the cortex, smell is the only sense that projects almost directly to the limbic system, the brain regions involved in emotion, memory, and attachment.
This is precisely why scent plays a central role in the awakening of desire. Research in sensory psychology, notably by Hers and Inslicht, shows that pleasant odors influence attraction primarily at very short distances, within intimate contexts. Applying perfume to pulse points can therefore enhance attractiveness, provided it remains subtle. Studies indicate that the scent should only be perceptible at an intimate distance, less than 45 centimeters. This subtlety creates what researchers describe as a reward loop. The other person must move closer to perceive the scent, and that physical proximity naturally fosters increased emotional closeness. Facial features constitute another key signal. In 2013, a study conducted by researchers at the University of New South Wales, notably Barnaby Dixon and Robert Brooks, asked women to evaluate the attractiveness of male faces displaying different beard styles. The results clearly showed that a well-defined 3-day stubble was perceived as the most attractive. It conveys virility and maturity without projecting excessive aggressiveness. By contrast, very light, barely visible stubble was rated as the least attractive.
Beyond a face, overall appearance also plays a major role. According to work in evolutionary psychology by researchers such as Devendra Singh and Randy Thornhill, a V-shaped body, healthy skin, and well-groomed hair are unconsciously interpreted as signals of health, vitality, and protective capacity. Even clothing color influences perception. Studies conducted by psychologist Andrew Elliott show that men wearing red are perceived as more dominant and more sexually desirable, a color associated across many cultures with power and energy.
Then comes the second phase of the romantic process, attraction. According to research in social psychology and relational neuroscience, particularly studies published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, physical appearance gradually becomes less important at this stage. What truly becomes decisive are actions, behaviors, and the way the other person makes us feel in everyday interaction.
According to a study published in 2022 in the journal Personality and Individual Differences, conducted by researchers drawing on the theoretical framework of love languages introduced by Gary Chapman, emotional preferences differ by gender. Men primarily seek physical touch as their main channel of emotional connection, whereas women place greater value on time spent together, meaning presence, attention, and emotional availability.
However, this same study highlights an essential point. The love language a person wants to receive is not always the one they naturally express. The data show that men tend to give more physical touch and acts of service, while women more often express attachment through shared time and emotional investment. This mismatch is well documented in contemporary relationship psychology.
This pattern is further supported by research in cognitive psychology conducted at Stanford University and published in Psychological Science. These studies show that women think about their partner approximately 54% of the time, compared to 44% for men. This difference in mental focus helps explain why shared time occupies such a central place in women's emotional experience.
However, as decades of research on couples have demonstrated, spending time together alone is not sufficient to guarantee a stable relationship. Psychologist John Gottman, a researcher at the University of Washington and founder of the Gottman Institute, has shown that lasting relationships rely on a precise ratio, approximately 5 positive interactions for every negative one. This model, based on more than 40 years of longitudinal observation, allows him to predict divorce with a level to 90%.
Why such an imbalance in favor of the positive? According to research in cognitive neuroscience published in Nature Reviews Neuroscience, this can be explained by what is known as the negativity bias. The human brain encodes negative experiences 3 to 5 times more strongly than positive ones. In other words, a single negative event can outweigh several positive moments if it is not counterbalanced. To offset this bias, researchers recommend intentionally creating repeated positive emotional experiences.
One of the key mechanisms identified in relationship psychology is what researchers call the theory of shared reality, developed in particular by Paula Pietro-Monaco and her colleagues and published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships. These studies show that couples who develop a private language, inside jokes, or shared references create a strong sense of we, which reinforces emotional cohesion and relational stability.
Along the same lines, research in affective communication conducted at the University of California shows that the use of personalized nicknames based on behaviors or shared experiences is far more effective at strengthening emotional intimacy than the use of generic terms such as sweetheart or my love. These nicknames function as symbolic markers of relational exclusivity.
Following the same principle, the theory of variable reward, originating in the foundational work of B.F. Skinner and later confirmed by brain imaging studies published in Neuron and the Journal of Neuroscience, plays a central role in emotional attachment. Neuroimaging research shows that reward circuits in the brain, particularly those involving dopamine, are activated more intensely when outcomes are unpredictable. This is the very same mechanism that explains addiction to social media. We never know when the next reward will arrive.
Applied to seduction and romantic relationships, this logic means that it is sometimes essential to surprise. An unexpected gesture, a spontaneous attention, an improvised outing. As confirmed by studies on relational novelty published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, these variations break monotony and help sustain emotional excitement over time.
Humor is also a major component of this phase. Research in evolutionary psychology, particularly studies conducted by Jeffrey Miller at the University of New Mexico and published in Evolutionary Psychology, shows that women are especially attracted to men who can make them laugh. Men, by contrast, place less importance on women's sense of humor. What attracts them more strongly is the fact that a woman laughs at their jokes.
This asymmetry reveals a deeper mechanism. According to these same studies, male humor is unconsciously perceived as a signal of intelligence, creativity, and self-confidence, three qualities that, from an evolutionary perspective, are strongly associated with a good long-term partner. As attraction consolidates and stabilizes, a third phase gradually begins to emerge, a phase that is less spectacular but far more structuring: attachment.
As attraction deepens, this third phase becomes attachment. According to research in attachment psychology, it is a deep emotional bond that goes far beyond initial excitement and early passion. This attachment no longer rests solely on desire or novelty, but on a sense of emotional security and continuity.
According to attachment theory developed by John Bowlby, a British psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, and later empirically validated by Mary Ainsworth at Johns Hopkins University, the way we attach in adulthood is strongly influenced by our early relational history, particularly our relationship with parents or primary attachment figures during childhood.
This body of work traditionally distinguishes four attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. These styles are not fixed labels, but relatively stable relational tendencies, widely documented in the scientific literature on developmental and clinical psychology.
However, despite this psychological dimension, biology continues to play a decisive role in couple dynamics. This is where what couple therapists and relationship researchers call the pursue-withdraw cycle comes into play. This model is described in particular in the clinical work of Susan Johnson, founder of emotionally focused therapy, and is widely referenced in contemporary research on adult attachment. This cycle begins when one partner becomes emotionally distant. In response, the other partner attempts to restore closeness by pursuing the relationship more actively, through questions, demands, or efforts to reconnect. But the more this partner pursues, the more the other feels overwhelmed, leading them to withdraw even further. This back and forth creates a relational spiral.
According to attachment-based models, the pursuing partner gradually develops an anxious attachment pattern, while the withdrawing partner shifts toward an avoidant attachment style. This dynamic is one of the most frequent causes of chronic conflict in romantic relationships, as shown by numerous studies published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships.
This phenomenon affects women in particular. According to research in evolutionary psychology, especially the work of David Buss at the University of Texas, in ancestral environments, the withdrawal of attention from a male partner could signal a major threat: the abandonment of the partner and her offspring. To mitigate this risk, women evolved with heightened sensitivity to signs of emotional and relational disengagement. This tendency is supported by a study published in 2025 in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, showing that, on average, women fall in love more intensely than men and display stronger emotional responses to signals of closeness or withdrawal within the relationship. Over the course of her research in anthropology and the neuroscience of love, Helen Fisher identified a striking pattern. Demographic data show that the majority of divorces occur approximately 4 years after marriage. This figure is not arbitrary. 4 years corresponds roughly to the time required for a human child to become partially autonomous from a biological and developmental standpoint.
Once this threshold is crossed, according to Helen Fisher's evolutionary analysis, the original biological function of the joint presence of both parents tends to weaken. At that point, some women, aware that they can now care for the child on their own, choose to end the relationship. This observation profoundly challenges the idea that romantic love is naturally eternal.
In reality, as shown by research in anthropology, attachment biology, and evolutionary psychology, love often follows a cycle that responds to adaptive needs related to reproduction and survival. However, this biological mechanism is not a fatality. As many researchers point out, including Helen Fisher herself, understanding these mechanisms allows us not to be ruled by them, but to work with them consciously.
With the right knowledge, it becomes possible to redirect certain automatic tendencies and to build lasting love. Evolution cannot be erased, but it can be understood, moderated, and integrated through science and a deeper understanding of human behavior.
Let us return for a moment to the biology of sexual pleasure, because this is often where love begins, particularly for women. According to research in neuroendocrinology, during female orgasm, a powerful neurochemical cocktail is released. Oxytocin, often referred to as the bonding hormone, is secreted in large quantities. This hormone also plays a central role during breastfeeding, strengthening the bond between mother and child, as demonstrated by numerous studies in affective neuroscience.
In women, this release of oxytocin during sexual activity often acts as an unconscious trigger for romantic attachment. This is why physical intimacy carries such a deep emotional dimension. In men, however, the mechanisms are different. According to research in motivational neuroscience, it is not so much orgasm itself as the anticipation of sexual activity that activates reward circuits, particularly those involving dopamine.
Simply thinking about a woman, imagining a relationship with her, is enough to activate these circuits in the male brain. This can create a form of mental preoccupation, a desire for presence, understanding, and the need to impress the other. These differences clearly show that men and women do not fall in love in the same way, nor at the same pace.
This mismatch is often at the root of many misunderstandings at the beginning of relationships. Yet, as researchers in relationship psychology emphasize, these differences are not obstacles, but opportunities. By understanding the biological rhythms, emotional needs, and love languages of the other, it becomes possible to synchronize two distinct emotional worlds.
The secret does not lie in perfection, but in understanding. For example, knowing that a woman often places greater importance on shared time and words can encourage prioritizing meaningful moments together rather than simple compliments. Conversely, understanding that a man often experiences love through physical contact can lead to giving greater space to intimacy in order to strengthen the bond.
At its core, the key lies in building a strong sense of complicity, a shared universe where each partner feels seen, heard, and understood. The happiest couples are those who develop a unique form of language made of knowing glances, coded gestures, and words that belong only to them. According to research in couple psychology, this shared language acts as an emotional cement, capable of withstanding time and life's uncertainties.
Too often, we listen in order to respond, to justify ourselves, or to defend our position. But listening in order to feel, to welcome the other person's emotion without judgment, is something entirely different. According to the work of the humanistic psychologist Carl Rogers, this form of listening, which he called unconditional empathic listening, creates a genuine space of emotional safety. And within that space, something fundamental can occur. Love can be reborn. Not as it was on the first day, but with a new maturity, forged through hardship and through the shared willingness to weather storms together.
Research in couple psychology clearly shows that love is not a straight line. There are moments of doubt, frustration, and emotional fatigue. But according to developmental models of the couple used in contemporary marital therapy, these moments are not failures. They are necessary passages, transitional phases that allow for a deeper understanding of oneself and the other. Someone who truly loves does not seek to win against their partner, but to win with them. It is an alliance, not a battle, a space where vulnerability becomes possible without fear of judgment.
And if, despite all efforts, the relationship does not hold, this does not mean that love never existed. Studies in compatibility psychology show that two people can love each other deeply without being suited to building a shared future. Love does not always guarantee compatibility. It must be accompanied by shared values, common goals, and an aligned vision. Without these, people may move along parallel paths that eventually drift apart. In such cases, the greatest expression of love may be to let the other go without resentment, with gratitude for what was lived, as emphasized by contemporary approaches to conscious separation and emotional resilience.
But when the foundations are solid, when both partners are committed to growing together, love becomes like a garden that must be watered, pruned, and protected. The metaphors used in systemic psychology are clear.
There will be seasons of drought, storms that tear away leaves. But if the roots are deep, nothing can uproot what was carefully planted. Research on secure attachment confirms that relational stability depends less on intensity than on the strength of emotional foundations.
Lasting love is not a miracle. It is an art. The art of choosing the other every day, even in the ordinary, even in silence, even in moments of imperfection. Research in commitment psychology, particularly work emerging from acceptance and commitment therapy, developed by Stephen Hayes, shows that enduring relationships rely less on emotional intensity than on coherence between deep values and everyday actions. It is also necessary to accept that love evolves alongside our own transformation. The man or woman we were at the beginning is not the same 10 years later, and that is a good thing. To love is also to love the future version of the other, the one we do not yet know. It is to accept growing together, rediscovering one another, and falling in love multiple times with the same person in different forms. Researchers refer to this as joint relational growth.
Thus, falling in love is not a single act. It is a cycle, a repetition, a choreography that constantly reinvents itself. There is desire, attraction, attachment, and sometimes separation, like a season coming to an end. But this separation is not always a final ending. It can be a pause, a need to adjust the dance, to find the rhythm again. And even when the story ends, it is never meaningless. It leaves an imprint, a trace, a lesson. At its core, loving means accepting impermanence. It is choosing tenderness in a world of noise, creating intimacy in a world of appearances, truly seeing the other beyond masks and habits. And if we understand this, if we respect the invisible laws of human love, then even evolution, with its millennia-old programming, will have no power over two hearts determined to beat together.